Welcome to the 517 In Your Business podcast. Here's your host, Mary Gaida.
Welcome to the 517 In Your Business podcast. Our guest today has been on before, and she has such great information we all need to know. And this time, we'll discuss what you need to know if you're injured on someone else's property. Please help me welcome Katie Tucker, lawyer, Sinas Dramis law firm. Katie, people hear premises liability and often think it's just about slip and fall cases. Is it broader than that?
Yes, slip and falls are a common example, but premises liability as an area of law is actually much broader. It involves injuries caused by any unsafe conditions on someone else's property, whether that's a business, a residential complex, apartment complex, or a private home. Some examples include broken stairs or handrails, uneven sidewalks, icy or slippery walkways, or even poor lighting in parking lots. The key question is whether the property owner failed to keep the property reasonably safe in determining whether you may have a premises liability claim.
Right. And I can see these things just picturing around my neighborhood and home. And since this can happen in so many everyday places, it might help to put all of this in sort of real world terms.
Yes, and some real world examples of a premises liability case that people may not expect would be a situation where you're at the grocery store, you're walking down a grocery store aisle, and a spill is not cleaned up in a reasonable amount of time, causing you to slip, fall, injure yourself. Again, we mentioned parking lots a moment ago. Potholes or poor lighting can lead to falls, icy or slippery conditions that again are not addressed by the property owner in a reasonable time frame with notice. These are all places that people in our community visit every day, and this is why this is an area of law that we want to introduce our community to, so that hopefully not, they don't injure themselves in any way. But if you are injured or you know someone who is injured in one of these instances, you have some guidance about next steps.
Right. And some that I've seen are leaning against those rails, those handrails, and fences and things like that. So when people hear those examples, a lot of them might immediately say, so does that mean the owner is always responsible? So do property owners automatically have to pay if someone gets hurt on their property?
Great question. No, just by virtue of the fact that someone's injured does not automatically mean that they have a viable premises liability claim. An injury alone doesn't automatically mean that the owner is legally responsible. Under Michigan law, courts and ultimately juries consider whether the owner knew or should have known about the dangerous condition. We call that actual or constructive knowledge under Michigan law. And whether they had enough time to fix it or warn people who they either invited onto their property or who may be on their property for a variety of reasons. And again, those are fact-specific questions that the courts and juries grapple with. But again, just by virtue of the fact that someone's injured on your property does not necessarily mean that they have a claim, a viable legal claim against you. There are these other factors that are important to that question.
Right. So that's where people often hear some of these legal phrases that sound fairly intimidating or confusing. One of them is the open and obvious rule. What does that really mean for the average person?
Yeah, great question. Again, the open and obvious rule is one that's existed under Michigan law for a long time. It's changed, it's evolved, but where it currently stands is that even if a danger is visible or open and obvious, as the phrase would suggest, a property owner may still have responsibility to the people that they invite or permit on their property. So the focus is really under the current state of the law on whether the owner acted reasonably under the circumstances. Just if you're injured, be aware that just because you saw the condition before you were injured by it doesn't automatically mean that you don't have a case. Again, it's a really fact-intensive inquiry. And the key question is, did the owner act reasonably to protect you from that hazard on their property, even if it was open and obvious?
Right. So regardless of the legal terms, what really matters is how serious were the injuries when something goes wrong. And let's talk about some real examples of how serious those injuries can be.
Yeah, so certainly in my practice and across our law firm, we've seen people who have unfortunately sustained some really serious injuries as a result of premises liability conditions and slip and falls and hazardous conditions on property. Some examples are broken extremities, broken hips, wrists, back or spinal injuries, head injuries or concussion. Closed head injury is common, especially where someone, for example, slips and falls on ice and strikes their head on the pavement. And all of these injuries can really adversely impact independence, person's ability to earn income, and their quality of life, even long after the fall or the injury occurs. So, unfortunately, these injuries can be very serious, and that's why it's important to evaluate whether you may have a claim to allow you to get back on your feet and get back to work and get the medical care that you need.
Right. So, if someone is injured in one of these situations, they usually want to know what they should do right away. So, what happens if you get hurt on someone else's property? What's the first thing you should do?
The first thing you should do is seek medical attention. Even if the injury doesn't seem particularly serious at first, if you sustained any injury, it's really important to be evaluated by a medical professional. In my personal practice, I've seen many cases where someone is injured, doesn't think it's all that serious, only to find out over the weeks and months ahead that actually, yes, they did have a more serious injury. This is really common with regard to closed head injury that can take weeks or months for symptoms to really manifest and for the injury to become more obvious. So, seeking medical attention is critical. The next thing that you should do or seek assistance from a loved one to help you do is to document the scene. It's critically important to take photos and videos of the hazard itself and the surrounding area. It's also important that you report the incident to the property owner or the manager. So, for example, if you're injured in the parking lot of a store, you want to go inside or send someone, a trusted friend or loved one inside to report the incident as soon as possible afterwards. You also want to get names and contact information for any witnesses to the incident. Again, depending on the severity of the injury, this might be something you need assistance from friends or family to do. But looking for witnesses and getting their contact information can be really critical down the road. And finally, you should avoid giving recorded statements to insurance companies without legal guidance. After you're injured in an incident like this, you may receive a phone call from the insurance carrier for the property owner, reaching out to try to settle your claim. Be aware that those calls are almost invariably recorded and can and will be used down the road should you proceed with litigation. And it's really important to get that legal consultation before you make any statement.
Yeah, it sounds like it. What people do in those first hours can really sort of impact what happens later. So, what mistakes do you see people make that will impact that claim later?
One of the most critical mistakes is not documenting the condition that caused the injury, the hazard on the property that caused the injury before it is either repaired or removed by the property owner. Unfortunately, it's really difficult to pursue one of these claims if there's no documentation of exactly what that hazard looked like, how it appeared to you when the injury occurred. And that's why getting that photo and video of the hazard, whether it be the spill in the grocery aisle or the state of the ice and snow that you slipped on, it's critical to document that, and not doing that can really adversely impact your ability to make the claim later. Another mistake is waiting too long to get medical care. Again, it's often the case that you may not know how severely you're injured or the nature, extent, severity of your injury immediately after, and without medical evaluation and medical professionals documenting what they're seeing, that can be difficult to establish later, and also can lead to arguments that, hey, your injury wasn't that serious because you didn't go right away to the doctor. So just being mindful of those things. And then again, another common mistake is, giving a recorded statement to the insurance company or communicating with the adverse party's insurance company directly without kind of realizing that they're in an adverse position to you, and you have to have your guard up.
Right. So, what if the injured person thinks they were partly at fault?
Fortunately, Michigan follows comparative fault, and that means that a person can still recover compensation or money damages, even if they share some of the responsibility or some of the fault for the injury or the incident occurring. Under Michigan law, fault is weighted and balanced. It's not an all or nothing proposition. And so just be aware that even if you do believe you bear some fault, hey, I should have seen that. I had some warning, but I still tripped or fell or injured myself. You may still have a claim, and that's why consulting with a legal professional, a lawyer, can be really critical to evaluating the viability of that claim.
Right. I think another thing that people don't always realize is there is that time limit. So how long do people have to take legal action after a premises injury here in Michigan?
In most cases, the statute of limitations is 3 years from the date of the injury. But again, even though our statute of limitations is somewhat long and gives you that 3-year period, your best bet if you think you may have a claim is to act quickly, especially with regard to preserving evidence and witness memory, witness recollection. So you have 3 years, but it's our best advice to investigate and seek counsel as to whether you may have a viable claim as soon as possible following an injury.
Okay. So there's still a lot of misunderstanding around these cases. What do you think the biggest misconception people have about these premises liability cases is?
One of the misconceptions, in my view, is that people, kind of think that people who are pursuing these types of claims are just out to get money. And in reality, yes, if you're injured, there are all kinds of reasons why you deserve compensation for those injuries. But in many cases, pursuing a claim is also about accountability and safety.
Yes.
And so, yes, the person who's injured deserves compensation for those injuries, but pursuing the claim can also make the property owner more aware of the hazard that they cause, less likely to allow the condition that caused the injury to occur or happen in the future, and making sure our community is safer.
Absolutely. I have my own example of that is so I used to be a runner and I would trip over the raised concrete in sidewalks and I would get pretty hurt. But I thought it wasn't so much about me, but maybe an elderly person or a child on their bike who didn't see
Exactly.
that. So
Exactly.
I really like that that's in place for that. So
Yeah.
for someone listening who's unsure whether it's their situation even counts, they're thinking, what do I do? So what's your advice to someone wondering whether they even have a case?
My best advice, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is to consult with a lawyer soon after your injury, as soon as possible. And you can certainly ask a trusted loved one to reach out on your behalf, depending on again the severity and the nature of the injury. But consulting with an attorney as soon as possible after the incident occurs is really your best course of action in evaluating whether there is merit or viability to the claim. That can help clarify for you whether the property owner in your case had a duty, whether the hazard was preventable, and that what steps should be taken next if you are interested in pursuing a claim. And so again, that early consultation is really critical to successful resolution of a premises liability claim.
Absolutely. So to just boil everything down, if listeners can take away just one message from today's conversation, Katie, what would that be?
I would posit that the most important message is that your injury matters, and so does how it happened. Property owners under Michigan law have responsibility to keep people in our community safe. You should take your injuries seriously, document what you can, don't wait to ask questions, but really understanding your rights by listening to a podcast like this one or doing additional research is the first step to protecting those rights.
Thank you so much, by the way, for being here today. You brought a lot of things to light that I think we just don't think of. We're busy, right? We're not checking things around our home or we think, oh, that'll never happen. It's fine. I'll get to it next week. And then suddenly you're in a little bit of trouble.
Absolutely. And it's a great reminder to all of us as homeowners and property owners to be vigilant and to ensure your property is in good state condition. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is a really important topic and I really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. And if today's conversation made anyone think differently about injuries that happen in everyday places, remember that understanding your rights matters. If you or someone you love has questions about a premises injury, speaking with an experienced attorney can help clarify your options, and you can learn more at sinusdramis.com.
Thanks for listening to the 517 In Your Business podcast. Get to know local businesses better by reading 517 Business Magazine. Get your subscription at 517mag.com/subscribe.